The Sega Saturn launched in Japan in late 1994, selling out instantly and proving to be a success. Things looked bright for its North American release, planned for September 2nd, 1995. Well, as is well known among gamers by this point, it didn't launch on September 2nd, 1995, it launched on May 11th, 1995, as a sudden surprise to everyone that ended up hurting the system in the long run. This surprise launch came with 6 games. Since most North American publishers were planning for the original September launch, these games would be the only ones available for the system for 3 months. So, were they enough to tide over Saturn owners in that long period? Let's see. Let's take a look at all 6 of the Saturn's North American launch games and find out if the system's fans had it good or not. To make things easy, let's go in alphabetical order. First, let's look at Clockwork Knight, Sega's big platformer of the Saturn's launch. Now, I say big because it's the only one they had. No Sonic, not even a less popular but established series like Ristar or Alex Kidd, but Clockwork Knight, a game about a toy knight named Pepperochow, who must save the kidnapped princess toy who wakes up all the other toys every day at midnight. Without her, the toys will never wake again. Okay then. So yeah, the story has this total 80s anime movie vibe that's overly complicated and dark for its target audience. But I completely dig that kind of stuff, so that's cool. And it has a lot of cutscenes to tell its story. Again, cool, especially when compared to previous gen platformers that generally had nothing of the sort. The only problem is that they're Saturn cutscenes, which means they're much lower quality than what you'd eventually see on the PS1. As for the gameplay, well, it's okay. There's a lot of puzzle-solving elements, like pushing blocks or figuring out which route to take. Defeating enemies has this very satisfying pop effect. The game actually reminded me a lot of the Toy Story game for Genesis and Super Nintendo. Not only for its obvious theme, but also its overall look and feel, though this game's Japanese release actually predated that one by a good year. The only thing that really bothered me gameplay-wise was how slippery the movement can be, especially the jumping. It can be easy to miss your mark. And it's made even worse in the kitchen level where all the surfaces are extra slippery because realism, I guess. The highlight of this game would probably be the bosses, which are really cool, with creative solutions to defeating them. The effects on them are also pretty good 3D showcases for the Saturn. This is one of those games where playing it on the easiest difficulty means you can't see the final level and true ending. Kind of annoying, but considering you can beat the game in a couple of hours, it's understandable why they put that in. With its graphical effects toned down, Clockwork Knight could have easily been a Genesis game. It definitely feels like something from that era. Still, it does have a bizarre charm to it. I don't regret the time I put into the game. Next is Daytona USA, a port of one of Sega's most iconic racers, and one of the highest grossing arcade games of all time. If you like arcade racers, this is one of the best ones you can possibly play, even to this day. It's extremely fast and incredibly intense. When playing, you quickly realize your focus should be less on getting ahead of your fellow racers and more on getting to each checkpoint under a certain time. For example, if you can't finish every lap in under 20 seconds in the beginner course, you're not even going to finish the race. Once you can get your time up, winning comes easy. Still, getting to this point is easier said than done. Mess up even once and you'll find yourself restarting due to the slight loss of time. I played the game for over 3 hours before finally getting down a strategy to place first. Now, that may seem like a big time investment, but I was so absorbed in the game I barely felt like that much time had passed. It's a very engrossing experience. And if there's one thing that helped make the time fly by, it's the game's legendary soundtrack. I found myself singing along to the various tracks as I was playing, something I can't say about many other games I've played before, let alone a racing game. The songs may seem a little odd for the genre, but that doesn't matter because they're just so damn catchy. So, how does the Saturn version stack up against the original? Well, it has its pros and cons. It's nowhere near as impressive graphically, as should be expected. There's a ton of pop-in giving you not much of a chance to look at the game's cool scenery. And, of course, the frame rate is much lower. It does have some extra features though, like Saturn mode, which has more selectable cars, such as this one that makes the game much, much easier. Seriously, I wish I knew about the super easy blue car before putting all that time into placing first in arcade mode. Actually, nah, I'm glad I did it the legit way. This game was Saturn's answer to Ridge Racer on the PlayStation. In terms of which port was done better, I'd have to give it to Ridge Racer, which is an all-around smoother experience. But with that said, this is by no means a bad alternative. I had a blast playing this version, despite its shortcomings. Okay, talk about a cool intro. This is Panzer Dragoon, an on-rails flight shooter, and the #1 technical showcase of what the Saturn could do at launch. For its time, it's very cinematic. The game takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, in which our hero is gifted a dragon by a dying warrior he must use to stop another dragon who is, of course, evil, from activating an ancient ruin. All the dialogue in the game is spoken in the world's own unique language, with some well-done cutscenes to tell its story. It's just a shame that, as I mentioned with Clockwork Knight, it's done in the Saturn's very low-res video format. Still, that doesn't stop the gameplay itself from being impressive. I mean, just look at the reflections in the water. Look at these collapsing pillars. The developers pulled every trick in the book to make this game look good. And its soundtrack is amazing, with several fully orchestrated pieces. The impressive presentation makes it feel light years ahead of its time. The game is not exactly long, taking place over 7 levels. As with Clockwork Knight, playing on the easiest difficulty means you can't complete the game. There's no saving either, with a limited amount of continues and health that can't be restored until a stage is completed. In keeping with Sega's roots, it definitely has an arcadey feel to it, and that's probably its biggest weakness. Attempting to beat the game on normal is a bit too difficult for my taste. I'm sure there's a trick to it, but I honestly felt the easy mode was just the right level of difficulty. I could beat Clockwork Knight on normal, but unfortunately, I just couldn't do it with this one. Luckily, there is a level select cheat, and even an invincibility cheat. Awesome. But you can't see the final cutscene if you play the game that way, and that's a real shame. Oh well. Despite that, I did really enjoy the game. I'd recommend playing this to see what could be done with the Saturn in the right hands. It's also worth playing simply for its unique world and incredible presentation. It's understandable why this game got a remake in 2020, with its sequel receiving one as well in 2021. Here's hoping they do the same for Panzer Dragoon Saga. Pebble Beach Golf Links. Have you ever seen the Season 7 Simpsons episode, Marge Be Not Proud? It's actually where I stole my channel icon from. Anyway, this game totally reminds me of the game Bart gets instead of the one he wanted, Lee Carvalho's Putting Challenge. Of course, that's simply how golf games looked at the time, with digitized golfers and, in this case, a 3D golf course. To up the ante even more, this one also has extremely cheesy instructional video-like cutscenes explaining the courses, all of which are modeled after real ones at Pebble Beach. So, I suppose if you were a huge fan of golf who couldn't afford to go to the real place, this would have been a good virtual alternative. It's not a bad game. It even has some other of-the-time advanced features, like the game's main featured golfer, Craig Stadler, making various comments on your golfing.
Super shot.
Still, I know this is just about the least interesting genre to hear about for most people watching, so I'm gonna keep this one short. Instead of playing this, go ahead and watch the Simpsons episode I mentioned.
So tell your folks, buy me, Bonestorm, or go to hell!
Buy me, Bonestorm, or go to hell! Bart!
And now, what is probably the most famous release of the Saturn's launch, Virtua Fighter. This was the system's pack-in game at launch, so if you were an early Saturn owner, chances are you played this. Strangely, it's the only T-rated game of the bunch, so it seems a little odd that this was what they wanted to give everyone. Still, being that it was the biggest known series from the launch lineup, it only makes sense. The game features a somewhat small cast of 8 fighters. Each of them plays mostly the same, with a relatively simple 3-button control setup. So really, it comes down to choosing the character you identify with the most. You can never go wrong with a ninja, but I also like Lao Chen, your typical old kung fu master guy. The arcade version of Virtua Fighter was the first fully 3D fighting game, so as you'd expect, it does look a little rough, especially considering the Saturn's less powerful architecture compared to its arcade counterpart. Still, it's not without its charm. I kinda like the simplicity of the characters, and they actually do have some fairly impressive aspects, such as the physics of some of their hair and clothes, or the emoting facial animations. There's something about the over-the-top faces they make when chosen in the player select screen that you just gotta love. The game is fairly bare bones. Outside of the arcade and versus modes, there isn't a whole lot to do or unlock, aside from ranking mode, which is basically a survival mode. But it was the first of its kind, so it's forgivable. Within the same year, the game would receive an updated version with Virtua Fighter Remix, which included highly improved graphics and some gameplay tweaks. I would call that a cash grab, except it was actually given away for free to all registered Saturn owners in the US. So good on Sega for that. Well, Sega of America at least. Virtua Fighter is an important part of fighting game history, and really gaming history in general. Despite being overshadowed by Remix, this is still a decent port. It's worth checking out. And finally, we get to Worldwide Soccer, Sega International Victory Goal Edition. Gee, think that name's long enough? Anyway, it's, of course, a soccer game. What am I saying? Soccer? Some of you might not know what sport I'm referring to. I should be saying Sakka, as it's known in Japan. Well, here it is. Actually, it's pretty good looking. It runs very smoothly with good looking character sprites. I mean, the grass is much better looking than in Pebble Beach Golf Links. And it looks especially good when compared to the PlayStation's one-launch sports game, Power Serve 3D Tennis. The less said about that game, the better. So, yeah, it plays fine and looks good. There's also a ton of modes to play, though Life is too short for me to spend that much time trying every mode in a soccer game. But if you did happen to like the genre, I think you would have been pleased with this one. Well, that's the final Saturn launch game alphabetically. Still, I hate going out on a sports game. So let's take a look at one more game. Let's see what Saturn owners got after a long wait.
Excellent!
After 3 months, Saturn owners got Bug, a 2.5D platformer starring, well, Bug. That's his name. In stark contrast to Clockwork Knight, which feels very much like an old anime movie, Bug feels a lot like something you would have seen on Nickelodeon or Fox Kids in the mid-90s. Bug is an actor, out to save his kidnapped family from an evil spider. In keeping with that theme, each stage is actually an extremely gigantic movie set. It seems like the makers of the game weren't quite sure if they wanted to make a 2D or 3D platformer, so this game doesn't quite feel like either. There are a lot of branching paths where you can move forward or backward in the environment, as well as a few open areas where you can move in any direction you please. There are also a lot of areas where you can walk on the wall, which is admittedly pretty clever and a good use of the 3D. My favorite little touch is how when you get the invincibility power-up, a stunt double comes in to take your place.
Stunt Bug! And action!
That's, again, clever. Oh, and this game also has a boulder chase over a year before Crash Bandicoot did, though it's much slower, less memorable, and yeah. In comparison to Clockwork Knight, Bug's movement while walking is actually a lot more responsive than Pepperucci's. However, his jumping is just as slippery. In fact, you'll probably find yourself falling to your death a lot more often than in Clockwork Knight. It's actually a very difficult game. Due to the short field of view, the game's enemies often come at you way too suddenly to avoid, and the bosses are just as annoying. The first one, a giant snail, takes dozens of hits to take down, with a continuously changing attack pattern you need to memorize before you can stand a chance. This is not the kind of game that should have limited continues, but of course it does. What's a 90s platformer without them? Actually, speaking of game overs, here's what you get if you don't continue. Wait for it. Whoa, okay then. This is definitely a game from a pre-Janet Jackson Gate world. But that's the thing about Bug. He has an attitude. As was the style at the time.
Delish! I hate that.
It's clear Sega had hopes of making Bug into their next big mascot. He even looks like Sonic when he bounces off something. But really, he's just too annoying to be likable. The developers even knew this and included an option to turn off his voice. I can understand why people weren't begging for more Bug games after this. Though, there was a Bug too. This is honestly worse than any of the Saturn's 6 launch titles. Even Clockwork Knight, with its flaws, at least had a feeling of sincerity to it. Bug does not. You'd be safe avoiding this one.
Nice butt!
And there you have it, the Sega Saturn's 6 North American launch games and what its owners got next. Considering all of the games released were first-party Sega titles, there really wasn't anything truly awful in the mix, aside from Bug, which wasn't an actual launch game. And, you know, that's pretty good for a system launch. Though, sadly, in this case, it ultimately didn't matter in the long run. If you're curious about the Saturn's biggest competitor, PlayStation's launch games, well, you're in luck, because I also have a video looking at that system's 12-title launch lineup. And if you happen to be enjoying the launch games series, be sure to subscribe to see more in the future, as well as rankings of the PS1's best games by year, and other various retro and modern reviews. Fans of the channel may also want to consider supporting it on Patreon. for early video access, sneak peek footage, and even a chance to pick games for a review. Well, with all of that self-promoting out of the way, it's time to wrap things up. As always, thanks for watching The Legend of Games.